But I mean, I feel like most of the sinning that happens in Houston happens on I-10. But do you know?
No, I disagree. My commute is on 59, and I bet it's contribute to 50% of Houston's sinning.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Welcome to Pod Have Mercy.
All right, hey, today on Pod Have Mercy, we're excited to have two wonderful guests from the AD Players here in Houston, Texas. And if you don't know about that, you need to find out about it. It's wonderful. I've been to some shows there.
Yeah.
What was the one with the Judas?
Kingdom Undone?
Yes. Wonderful.
Thank you. I directed it.
Did you really?
Yeah, it was fun.
That's awesome. Anyway, a theater that's very does all sorts of wonderful things in the community. So today we have Jayme McGhan. Did I say that correctly?
That's correct.
He's the executive artistic director, and Andy Pederson, who is the education and theater for young audiences director.
Yes, sir.
Did I do right?
You got it.
Because if I didn't,
100%.
I wrote down everything incorrect if I did that.
That's it.
So we're going to talk about the AD Players. We're going to talk about the stuff that you do. But what was really fascinating and interesting to us is you have a new play that's coming out on Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who we love. Matt did some teaching on Bonhoeffer.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about AD Players and the theater and kind of just how you do what you do from a big scale, and then we'll talk about the Bonhoeffer.
Yeah, so AD Players is, it's 58 years in, so we've been around for a long time. Jeanette Cliff George was our founder, and she, the West Alabama location had been around for, almost 30 years, something like that, before 2017 when we built our new space, which is the George Theater in the Galleria.
Beautiful.
Stunning theater.
I mean, it's crazy good.
State of the art, just perfect in every possible way. And so we tout ourselves as the world's leading Christian theater company. And I think that's accurate. I think there's no other theater that's quite like us. There's kind of attractions and Sight and Sound, for example, in Missouri or Pennsylvania. There's larger theaters in that capacity. But as far as actual,
I'm just saying.
Hey, don't you be dissing on Dollywood. Dollywood is great.
Dollywood is great.
So outside of Pigeon Forge,
That's right.
Correct.
So we produce plays and musicals that are edifying to the church, that challenge folks, that we talk about it as being stories of hope, joy, and redemption. That's what we're into. So we're theater makers that love Jesus. We're just a bunch of screw-ups that are pretty good at making theater, and we love Jesus.
Awesome.
And that's us. We come together and we create it. And so that's been really our 58-year history. It was true of Jeanette as well, and so we've continued that tradition.
That's great.
Yeah.
Anything to add?
No,
to that?
I mean, I'll let the executive director kind of cover that history.
Oh, I'm sorry. We do 5
but you can
shows a year.
explain it to the younger audience.
That's true. Well, you can talk about all the outreach we do because we do a ton of that.
Sure.
As well.
I'm relatively new to the Players. I'm getting close to celebrating my 1 year here. I moved my family down from Chicago last July to work specifically for AD Players.
Great time to move to Houston, by the way.
Fantastic. We moved in 2 days before Barrel. But we made it through.
That was a choice, huh? That was a choice.
So it's when the moving truck was available, so we drove on down, and it was good. So we're here. We're mostly Texan at this point, So I run the education program, and kind of coming out of COVID, things closed down our education and our theater for young audiences. And as we were starting to think back about how we can serve the community in kind of broader ways, I came in to think about who is theater missing? We're doing summer camps. We have 3 summer camps going on this summer, one in Spring Branch, one in Katy, one in Sugarland, where we're kind of doing like a hub and spoke model where we're out in the communities where...
We're in Spring Branch.
We're going to be at St. Mark Lutheran.
Nice.
Right there on Hillendall. That's actually my home church. My wife teaches first grade there, and my sons both go to school there.
That's great.
Yeah, so we are looking.
We have a campus that butts up to is it St. Matthew's? No, it's the one you're merging with.
St. Andrews. St. Andrews. Yes.
Yeah. So the Fairhaven, the Gessner Road campus. Yeah. We are adjacent to the St. Andrew campus.
I'm learning all my Houston geography. Getting
awesome.
It all. Yeah.
So that's the next where you have great connections because we had a lunch with the pastor of St. Mark's and
Matt Popovitz.
Yep.
Yeah,
Matt,
he's a
and
great guy.
the director
guy.
of your school too.
Yes, Dallas Lusk.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, great guys. Yeah, it's
all
like
this
that.
deep
That's
connection.
Yeah, it's all connected.
awesome.
So, but I mean, just to piggyback on a couple things that Jayme had said, we're also working with a couple of veterans organizations here, which has been really, really just amazing. We're working with Stay Tuned for Vets, which is a group that's looking to get Houston veterans involved in just kind of artistic outreach, right? So they're doing a lot of different classes in connection with helping expression right now as you're just trying to find your footing back in kind of normal life. So any veteran who's kind of in Houston is part of that. And then we've been also working with Camp Hope, which is for PTSD and extreme kind of trauma combat veterans, and that's
Incredible
been
place.
it's been it's an incredible ministry, but an incredible just humbling experience to work with those gentlemen, and it's just been fantastic.
Where is that rooted out of? Where does that come out of?
It's on Gessner. It's in Houston. It's in the on the north there, and they are fully donation run. They really take care of these guys who are 6 months, year and a half. Like they're there for a duration, and it's remarkable.
That's great.
Yeah,
that's phenomenal.
So it's been a blessing.
So that's us.
Yeah.
In a nutshell, really. We do 5 shows a year. We do big musicals. We do big plays. We do some challenging stuff. A lot of stuff that's more just kind of edifying. And sometimes we just do shows that are funny for the sake of it being funny, right? Not everything we do has a Christian component, but we try to lead all of our
you
shows
had
in that space.
so this past Christmas you did one. It was kind of like tell people about that. It was very creative, sort of family from different
Texas
places.
Carol?
The Texas
He's
Carol.
one of the writers
Texas
on that.
Carol.
So
really?
I co-wrote that with Kevin Dean, who's our artistic producer. Yeah, we did that. We did the first part of it for 2 years, and it was a hit. People just adored it. So we're like, I guess we got to write a sequel now. And I'm from Minnesota, so I was like, I'm out of Texas jokes. I got none left.
Yeah.
But luckily,
Just go to
Kevin is a
Buc-ee's.
native, so he's exactly
full
right.
of information.
You know what? Somebody
People
said
watch.
that. Like, you screwed up. You did not put Buc-ee's in the
Oh,
show. I was
you
like,
gotta put
we
it.
didn't. You're right.
Well, they
We
can
did not
sponsor
put
the
Buc-ee's
third
in.
one.
There we
Yeah,
go.
but
Yeah,
you did
yeah.
have like the family members, the Longhorn Aggie and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff going
that's
on.
The
all.
divided
Yeah.
house.
The core of a
Yeah.
Texas family. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and you've done that, and then as I said, it was last year, right? The one with Judas, from Judas's
Undone.
perspective,
Yeah.
Kingdom Undone.
Yeah.
That was really, really, really good.
It's a powerful show.
Yeah, and it's a great time of the year because it was a line. If I remember, it was a line like somewhere during the spring,
Right during Easter.
during the Easter season. Yeah.
You know what's interesting about that one? That we ticked a lot of people off with that show.
Yeah.
Really?
I got a lot of letters about that.
In what
one.
way?
It was fascinating to see how people's expectation of how Jesus and Judas and whomever should be portrayed,
right.
and when it's not portrayed in that
Right.
way, it just they lose their minds,
Yes.
right?
Because
and-
they have firsthand primary experience
Yeah,
in Judas.
yeah.
and
Yeah.
And that was a lot of the response, But people were upset that Jesus was
I
portrayed
know Judas.
not as this like absolutely super ripped 6'4" dude with blonde hair and blue eyes. This is he was a kind of scant Middle Eastern guy, right? And he was gentle and kind, and I was like,
And forgiving.
what really? And
Yeah,
forgiving.
I feel like that's
Imagine
Hope that goes all the way down.
A majority of folks loved it, but there was some
I
concerns
thought it was
about
great,
it.
and it was.
Thank you.
It is a different.
Different take.
You're coming at it from a different place, but I think that's again. There's dramatization, artistic kind of, but I don't think it was unfaithful in any way.
No,
to,
not at all. We wouldn't have
like,
done it if it was.
biblical kind of understanding. It just gives you a new look.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
It always challenges people. It's like what was the movie years ago? It was many years ago, where it sort of really focused a lot on the humanity of Christ. Was
Last
it
Temptation of Jesus.
The Last Temptation of Christ. And
Well,
there
that's
was,
going back. Yeah.
yeah, I'm old, dude. Of course I'm going back.
Yeah. Welcome to Gen
I mean,
X.
there
Welcome
were
to
some
Gen
there were
X.
some things in there that were not. It was not really biblical, but the whole premise of like this guy's really human too.
Yeah.
Was really just lost on some people.
Yeah.
Well, I think Western Christianity has a really difficult time with kind of the Jewish concept of it's midrash, right? Is that how you say it?
Right.
This notion of being able to fill in the story between, because they went from this village to this village. Oh, did they not have any conversations while they were going? You know what I mean? They walked
Well,
for
and then
2
his
days.
whole
And they didn't say anything, and they're like, something happened. Can we fill it in? Right?
He had a
So,
whole
yeah.
life up until 33 years old or whatever, and his public ministry started. And you have to think he just sat around and
Yeah.
picked his nose and didn't do anything.
That's right. Yeah.
Right.
Like there was actual stuff going
They
on.
had him in
Absolutely.
his little pod until it was time to.
Well, and then there's extra
had him in his
biblical, there's all sort of extra canonical like writings about that time that dates back
That's
2,000 years or so. But people are like, man, that's bad news. Don't be bringing that stuff in my church.
I think what y'all do is help us with a theological imagination, because often what we're saying is that often it gets kind of locked down in our own brains, and to see it portrayed in a different way allows some air to in and say, oh, maybe the grace of God goes that deep.
Yeah.
You know?
So have you guys seen or been connected to this new? It's on Amazon Prime. We're sponsored this week by Amazon Prime. Amazon Prime, which will ship things to your front door. Amazon Prime, I would love to have free Prime membership for the rest of my life. But the House of the House of David show. Are you familiar with this?
Yes, I'm familiar. I haven't seen it yet.
You haven't seen it.
Yeah.
Well, we started watching a couple. Have you seen it?
No.
So it's an 8-episode series on David, sort of at least the first part, but it's only based on like maybe 3 chapters of the Bible. So of course, if
Set in Chicago. No, just kidding.
not Chicago. No, but it's of course, you're going to have to fill in the gaps. I mean, you're not going to have very much of a it's going to one episode.
Yep.
But my wife and I were talking about it, and she's like, was something would happen? She goes, was that in the Bible? I was like, well, babe, since I'm a preacher, I mean, I could tell you right now that it was or was. I said, well, I'd have to go back and look. Darn, I don't know, but I mean, it's just, but it brings the story to life. In a way that I think enhances and enriches what can be in Chronicles and Kings, not the greatest reading material in the world. It's not exactly inspirational. I think that's kind of
Bit
what.
of slog.
Yeah, right. If you've ever done a read through the Bible, and you get past Kings, good on you.
Yeah.
Well, you won't make it. You pass Numbers.
Yeah, Deuteronomy.
Usually. But so now, one of the things that you've got coming up that we're really interested in talking to you about is you have a play that's starting today or
It opens Friday.
Previews tomorrow.
Wow.
Yeah,
Tomorrow,
and our own Jeff McMurrow here, who's a part of our staff, and if you see him around campus taking pictures of everybody, like a real weirdo.
Yeah, it's creepy guy with the camera.
Paparazzi. I'm always, when I go out to shake hands, I'm like, where's Jeff? Oh, this is my good side over here. But anyway, he's a part of this as well. Talked about this new play that's coming out around Dietrich Bonhoeffer.
Yep.
I'm really interested in hearing about this. We've talked a little bit about Bonhoeffer before here.
And also why an obscure German theologian pastor in the 30s has any freaking relevance to 2025. Like, why would you do that? Yeah.
We've teed you up.
So,
I'll let you take the first swing there.
Yeah, so I'll back it up a little bit. So Andy and I met in 2009.
Yep.
We were both professors at Concordia University, Chicago, and so we taught a class called Arts and Ideas, and as part of and it's a introductory class to get students to critically think, learn how to critically think. And in that space, we taught Bonhoeffer, and we taught, I don't remember everything that we did, but it was excerpts of Cost of Discipleship.
Sure.
And I knew a little bit about Bonhoeffer, but, working at a German Lutheran institution was very useful in learning more. Andy, however, knew quite a bit. And he, we had a lot of conversations even at that time, but both of us, I felt, were heavily moved by even being able to teach that at that time. Yeah. And so then fast forward, however many years later, and I took over at the helm of 80 Players, and one of the first things I did was say, we got to do a Bonhoeffer play. We've got to commission a play about Bonhoeffer that's, extraordinarily solid, that is not only theologically sound, the story sound, but also it's engaging, entertaining, and exciting to watch, and doesn't, go off the rails, really. And so that was 3 years ago. So I commissioned 22. Andy 3 years ago to write this. Little would I know that 2 years later I would also be headhunting him to come and become our director of education at TYA, Theater for Young Audiences. Sorry, I shouldn't use acronyms. And so
it's okay.
And so Andy has been in the process, and he'll speak to all of that. In fact, you guys mostly just want to talk to him today, but I'll give you the background at
You're
least.
just the eye candy.
That's right. Yeah, that's
Bring him along.
And so, anyway, so he started that process, and we walked through it all the way. Got that first initial draft, was really excited about it, and here we are. One day from previews and having an audiences. So,
Fantastic.
and I'll hand it over to you for your Tell the story, man.
So, I mean, just going back, I mean, this process, getting the commission, of course, because as a lifelong Lutheran, I've spent up until this point my whole career in Lutheran education. I taught in Lutheran high school for 8 years, and then had been at Lutheran University for the last 15. And so, thinking about just how what I've always been interested in as a believer and as a church worker, up until this point, the idea about faith being something concrete, right? I mean, there's obviously a very mystical, there's a very spiritual element to all of those pieces, but that idea of kind of lived faith. And for me, I saw that happening in Bonhoeffer with his focus on community, the way that community matters and what the church is for in that way, right? The church exists, if it exists at all, he says, for the care of others. Yes. And that's a deep challenge, right? That's a deep challenge. And then what do you do in the sacrificial space of taking care of those who are less than, or those who have been cast aside? How are you to sacrifice and save and protect those, not for yourself, but because that's what you're called to do? Yes. So when Jayme had reached out and said, we'd like to commission you, I said great. And so then I spent about 16 months researching, just really diving into the work, really looking at not only Dietrich's writings, but of course biographies and kind of scholarly work. And then I was teaching, directing, and have 3 children, and so I spent got to a point in July of, I guess, what would it be, 23? Yeah, I went to family friends lent us their kind of lake house, which is not really picturesque in any which way. It didn't have good internet at all, and it was far away. So I holed up for 4 days and was able to kind of get that first draft out, get those first 95 pages out. Wow. Because I knew where I was going to go, but I just needed a space where I was not going to get an email from the administration and get an email or have to deal with anything other than just getting this down. And so I knew where in my head it needed to go, and then this process has been incredible. The design team, the actors, the production staff. I mean, everybody has been phenomenal. It's just a blessing from start to finish here.
That's great. Yeah. What are some of the primary sources you use when you were looking at this stuff?
Well, I mean, so aside from Dietrich's, Cost of Discipleship, Life Together is actually the first thing I read as an undergrad, as a freshman in a theology class in undergrad, and so of course then Letters and Papers from Prison was really essential for trying to get the sense of his.
It humanizes.
His struggles, his fears, right? His frustrations.
I wish I could take this brown suit that I have on now and get my other brown suit, but I'm in jail and they won't let you come visit me, so it's kind of hard.
Well, and it's the minutia, right? Like the minutia of some of the daily life stuff, because we think he's this brilliant theologian, and he is or was, but it's also just the human side of that.
He talks about the hard beds, it's okay, and he said, I actually like going to bed at 8 o'clock.
It's mandatory.
I look forward to my dreams. He says that he talks about, he was writing his parents, he's like, I look forward to my dreams. He goes, and I've had good dreams. The guy is in prison, facing his own mortality, and he's still got that sense about it.
And it's funny because Andy's play, it's got a really lovely sense of humor in it. Like Dietrich Bonhoeffer is fully humanized because he's able, staring death in the face, he's still able to joke about it. And I'm like, may we all have that same conviction to be able to stand there and do that. And so he's also a very funny character in many ways too. Yeah.
Can you walk us through? So we say Dietrich Bonhoeffer, like we all know him, right? Yeah. So can you walk us through kind of
some
setting
people don't
who he
know
was?
They've heard the name, but they may not know the story.
Yeah, and why this is. Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So Dietrich Bonhoeffer was born in 1906 to a very prominent, Berlin family. His father, Karl Bonhoeffer, was this famous psychiatrist. Was very well to do. His mother was the daughter of a professor. So they had this very upper class, existence, right?
The folks at his dinner table were amazing, weren't they?
Yes. Oh, yeah. So I mean, so they were the chaired professors at the university and other high-powered individuals in Berlin. So and this is just who was in the house, in and out of the house for the Bonhoeffer children. Dietrich was second youngest. He had a twin sister, Sabina. They were children 6 and 7 out of 8 in the Bonhoeffer brood there, and they had a really kind of idyllic life, even as things started to turn. It wasn't until World War I when his brother Walter died. fighting in World War I that there was some cracks, some fissures in the family structure. But Dietrich went. He announced as a young teenager that he was going to be a theologian, and it wasn't because the family was overly religious. In fact, they were more culturally Christian, nominally Christian. But he was more academic, right? And then he went and got his doctorate by the time he was 21, like a big show off. Had written 2 dissertations, and then he went, and he was thinking this academic track, but also he felt called towards kind of pastoral ministry, which he had a gift for. There's actually been a great series of books about his youth work and actually about his congregational approach. And he goes and spends a year, and this is my favorite part of his biography, is when he spends a year in Harlem, or spends a year in New York, but it's in Harlem in particular. And that's actually one of the great sources that I used in this was a Reggie Williams book, Bonhoeffer's Black Jesus, which is a fantastic book. But but when he comes to New York, he finds the American theology as weak as can be. He's like, there's no Jesus here. There is nothing that is worthwhile. And Frank Fisher, a young black pastor from Atlanta, brings him to Harlem, brings him to Abyssinian Baptist, and says, this is where you're going to, find Jesus. And he does. He finds Jesus in the daily lives of the parishioners, and it's incredible. It's really incredible how it matters, not in an intellectual or even social level, but on a deep need. He's invited into the homes of the parishioners of Abyssinian Baptist. So he's breaking bread in the apartments in African American neighborhoods, and then he sees firsthand as they take a road trip just the segregation and the racism that Frank has to endure, and he can't fathom this. He can't encounter how this comes together. So I know I'm going into the weeds, but when he comes back to Germany, he has in 31, he's got a whole new appreciation for a number of things. For him, Jesus has become a different aspect of his life. Then it's not just this academic, it's not just this theological problem to figure out. It's actually this necessity. He also has a greater heart for those who have been cast aside and downtrodden, and he starts to take up the cause as, of course, Hitler's rise is occurring. He's finding himself more outspoken on the Jewish question, on matters of supporting those who are being cast aside. He writes, a few books, publishes a few things, but then he opens a rebel seminary at Finkenwalde from 1935 to 1937. So he's training pastors in secret, because the church, now the state church, has shifted towards being fully subservient to the Reich, and they are going along with Hitler, and they are not pushing back on any of these things. And so
not only are they not pushing back, they're pushing forward.
Right.
So you have theologians like John and I were talking about this. You have theologians like Kittle's, and I have all of Kittle's New Testament theology in my office today, who basically then penned the theological justification for genocide. Right? And so then you have Mein Kampf and the Bible that are placed on every altar in every Lutheran church in the country.
Well, and you start to see the Nazi flag hung over crosses, right? Like it becomes draped over this, and so Dietrich becomes a very outspoken and visible critic of the Reich, and it's not until his brother Klaus and his brother-in-law Hans, they get him involved in the Abwehr. He's about his deferment to go serve because his father's pulled all the strings he can pull. And Dietrich, by all accounts, was a terrible shot, so he would have been killed almost immediately. As is noted. But he finds himself in the Abwehr having to.
You should explain what the Abwehr is.
Yeah, the Abwehr is so everyone's fairly familiar with the Gestapo, right? Like the force of the Nazis there, and the Abwehr was another spy agency. It's kind of, you were thinking like FBI and CIA, right? They're kind of competing. They don't trust each other. They don't like each other. But the Abwehr had a strong resistant core. So Admiral Canaris, Wilhelm Canaris, was at the head of the Abwehr, and he was orchestrating these assassination attempts or just try to overthrow. And bringing in Dietrich was a really key move for them.
If you've ever seen the Valkyrie, that's a lot of the stuff behind the things that Dietrich Bonhoeffer was involved in.
Yes, very much.
Which I'm wondering why you didn't get Tom Cruise to play Dietrich Bonhoeffer.
Well, so
He was busy.
Yeah, we called.
Yeah,
we called.
He was busy.
Yeah.
He said, "Listen, we'll come back and we're doing
There was,
Joseph."
something about Houston like melting all of the
You think
plastic
Tom Cruise
surgery.
is Joseph
Can you
in the
see
movie?
that?
Go, Joseph. You know what they say.
Yeah, you don't have enough wires and
Yeah.
you know, he likes to do his own stunts.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's that would have been something. It would have been a whole new angle on the show.
100%.
Yeah. So Dietrich then, he tries to convince Bishop Bell and Churchill to go along with these plans, these secret plans to support. He's involved in smuggling Jews out to Sweden. He's very much involved in a couple of initial assassination attempts. Not the actual carrying out of them, but in the planning and going along with that. And then he's arrested in 43. They think embezzlement. They think some kind of money laundering. They think something that is not yet to the level of a capital crime, and he's just thrown in Tegel prison where he will never leave. He spends these months there, and then on to Flossenburg where he's executed in April of 45.
Right before the
very almost right at the end of the war.
Yeah, well, so tomorrow is the anniversary of his martyrdom, and also our first preview. Yeah, so we also have a great marketing team.
Great
yeah,
We planned that completely. That's not true. We had no idea.
You had no idea.
I'm just sitting here going, you guys are brilliant,
You guys are
man.
awesome.
You put this together.
You're just
like
lucky. That's even better.
100% like it.
That's
By
great.
the grace of the Lord.
That is one of the things I love about this story is, and his sister, who's
Sabina,
Sabina, who's married to also a person in the resistance.
Yes.
They come to him and say, his brother-in-law says to him, in so many words, why is it that you Christians always want other people to do your dirty work, and then you step in at the very end to clean up the mess? You know that the mess needs to be created, and that's where that idea of putting, if a madman's coming towards
with a car,
who would not put a spoke in the wheel, right? And so he has this like deep, I think, dilemma that I think my favorite Bonhoeffer text is probably his Unfinished Ethics, where he's really working out how do you actually be a Christian in a world come of age, right? So it's fascinating.
Yeah. So so that's to answer the the question of who is Bonhoeffer, like that's who this guy is, right? And we've only come to probably his prowess, or not his prowess, but his popularity has probably grown exponentially decade by decade, right? Eberhard Bebke brings those letters and papers forward, and more information keeps coming out as we find more artifacts and archives and troves of things, and
So why this play? I mean, besides like being Lutheran, it's not like you couldn't have done something on on Martin Luther or any not that you only have two heroes in the Lutheran Church.
They
I'm just
do.
saying.
That's
That's it. That's all I know.
That's all there is.
I just remember, was Philip Melanchthon? Was he?
Yeah,
he was an educator too.
he was.
Was Zwingli?
I mean, yes,
I think.
Yeah.
There's some only names I remember from
but
seminary.
you're going back to the 1400s now.
That was a good time.
Those are heroes.
That was a good year for y'all.
Heroes of the faith. Philip Melanchthon.
Let me ask why this story? Why now? What's so compelling?
Well, so I think and this is again just my thought on this is that the role of a Christian, right, is always kind of that fraught space of like we are sojourners here, right? This is not our home necessarily, right? Like to kind of flush back to the 1930s, of like heaven is my home, kind of thinking about we are not just here forever. Like this is not just it. As believers, we know that there is a greater reality and a greater future for us. And but we're here. Like, and you can't shake the fact that when you are in this place and there is so much hurt and there is so much suffering and there is so much evil in the world, well, what do? Do you just pray that it avoids you? Do you just show up in church and you tithe your 10% and you go on and try to be a good person and you signal your lane changes before getting on the Sam Houston and swerving all the way back to the other exit because that's not really where you need to get on.
I know you.
Yeah, no, it's but I mean, I feel like most of the sinning that happens in Houston happens on I-10. But do you
I disagree. My commute is on 59, and I bet it's contribute to 50% of Houston's sinning.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah, all right, yeah, we agree to disagree. It's so that space there is most of Houston's sin problem, the highways. But I think that the space of looking at from a challenging perspective is what are we supposed to do here? How does faith become action? How does faith actually matter in the lives of other people? How does your faith matter? And that's,
and if you see the madman, what can you do to be exposed?
What do you do?
And within a Christian context, that makes sense, and that I think the Holy Spirit would guide you in that space. But and Bonhoeffer certainly prayed through that consistently.
Mm-hmm.
He was always asking for that guidance and that help. But yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why we selected it. And to be perfectly honest, we try to be apolitical in almost every single way that what we work, because we've got folks from all over the spectrum that come to and everybody's welcome at 80 Players, right? But this particular story is so palpable and then all of a sudden we have these kind of gleanings of authoritarianism that have kind of reached back out again, and we go, oh no, right? Like there's this beautiful moment in the play behind it. It says this will all be over 100 years. Behind it's a projection in the prison, and it says in 100 years this will all be over. And we were all laughing about this because we were like, well, I think Orwell was pretty right that this is a giant cyclical thing. It just happens over and over and over again. There will always be somebody who tries to reach out in an authoritarian manner, and the question is will that lead to murder and death, and then what do we as Christians do to stand in defiance against that?
What I love about this play and about what y'all are doing and about Bonhoeffer, and it's something that John has been preaching on for a while in the church, is that really the core of our faith is, if we were to wed it to any political system, it leads us away from Jesus.
That's right.
And the core of Bonhoeffer is that anytime you wed Christianity with any empire, any move of power, in fact, he says those that align themselves with the German Christian church, right?
Yeah.
Separate themselves from Jesus.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is like when you realize, what is the German? Those are the folks that are draping the cross with the swastika, that have Mein Kampf on the same altar, that have basically created a theological opening for genocide, right? And have baptized that in the name of Jesus.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where the church becomes actually the Antichrist.
That's right.
Right? And Bonhoeffer saw that and walked in a way that is, I think, I love that he still has things to say to us today.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think it's challenging things.
Yes.
I think nobody should really read Bonhoeffer and be comforted. I think that should be the kind of the baseline test, is like, do I read this? Am I convicted? Am I challenged? And I think that's why we need to keep coming back.
Right. And I think it's interesting that he was a deep reader of his time too. So Nietzsche, when you think about the death of God, and then he comes out with this understanding of the religiousless Christianity, right? This understanding that our religion and Christianity has brought us to two religious countries that believe in the name of Jesus, are willing to drop nuclear bombs on each other in the name of Jesus because we are right.
That's right.
Right? And he says this is a world that you have to live in the world with God but without God.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that's faith. That's something that summons us to not an idea of how do I get out of this world, but how do I move in the world when I can ask the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I have to move in a faithful way that is beyond political, beyond theological, beyond my denomination. And it's not just the WWJD. It's like, this has implications for my life.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, and I mean, his thought all the way through too was not that there was a lot of these actions that didn't necessarily give him peace.
Yeah, right.
I mean, he still struggled with it. And that,
right.
and I mean, in
That's
the ethics you mentioned too, where he writes about,
Yes.
that anyone who acts is going to bear guilt.
Yes.
And that guilt is inescapable.
Yes.
And that piece is pretty profound, right?
Yes.
Because we are not God.
Well, because he's talking about the guilt of murder there,
Yeah.
and his own complicity within murder, right? And so he deals with that. What's called the teleological argument.
Yep.
I've done a really bad thing, but it saved a lot of people. So God is good. He says you can't negotiate. You go to God as a sinner.
That's right.
And God does with you what He wants, right?
Yeah. Well, and so I mean, going back to Harlem in New York, Jean Lasserre, who was a young French pastor who was a deep pacifist.
Yes.
That was one of those big challenging moments for Dietrich, because he was still in his nationalistic kind of mindset, right? Like Germany, you'd fight for Germany, you'd support it because you want your homeland to be strong and powerful. And Lasserre is saying, no, like you are called to radical peace. You are not called to do death is or murder and killing, like they're all in the same bucket, regardless of how we classify or say one is okay or not. And that really shook Dietrich's whole space of how do I exist going forward? How do you actually? And so that makes these choices later on, his willingness, even more, I think, profound and potent.
Yeah. His ethics, where he asks, I think, 3 questions: who is Christ, where is Christ, and what is my responsibility, right? And he decides, well, who is Christ is in my brother and sister, the Sanctorum Communio, right? The other, that's the Martin Buber stuff he was reading, right? And so then he says, where is Christ? Oh, Christ is in the ovens of Auschwitz, right? What is my responsibility? Right? And that leads him in a very different way of asking the question, what should I do? Because most Christians, if you've been raised in any denomination, always not to tell a lie because it's sin. Not to do that. He says those are the wrong. You don't need God in that. Kant creates a world with you don't need God. You just need the bullet points.
Right.
And he says actually to give yourself to Christ is a very dangerous proposition.
Yeah.
It puts you in a place where you can't stand on Jesus said it, I believe it, that settles it. You are called to an action in the world that you don't know.
Yeah. But
you're called to stand with those in the ovens, right?
Well, and so I mean, the title of this play is the full title is "How to Die: The Life of Dietrich Bonhoeffer," and so that comes from the line of in Cost of Discipleship when he says that when Christ calls a man, he bids him come and die. Yeah,
yes.
Which is just straight back to Galatians 2:20, which is just a beautiful thing, right? So
How is writing this play, acting in it, producing it? How has it changed you?
I mean, not much for me because I've just been.
He just signs the checks.
I'll tell you, what's interesting? I do want to say one thing about us as 80 players. The thing that I am very proud of, and then one of the things that I love about who we are and what we do is that you do not have to be a Christian to work at 80 players. In fact, over half of our full-time staff are not believers. And a majority of our actors, of our designers are not believers. And they're welcome, and we love them, and they're really good at what they do, and they're kind people, and they're generous in spirit, and so we try to love on them and make sure that we show everything that we know about the kingdom of God that is good and right and true and beautiful. We try to lay that at their feet, and so that they can see it. And so, in that regard, I think the cast, a number of cast members, a number of folks who are working on this are they don't necessarily have a relationship with Jesus. They don't really think about that, but I do think that they get moved by these things. You know what I mean? They come in, they do this show. This one is no different than any other shows that we do, but they come in and they go, wow, there's something different about this place. Like, that you guys are just a bunch of jerks, but...
well, which is true.
We're
different
It
jerks.
takes a long time to get
That's
there.
the best part. That's what we say. We're like, listen, we're just a bunch of screw-ups who love theater and Jesus, just like you guys. We just love Jesus. You don't. You know what I mean? That's the only difference. So to that end, I'm very proud of the work that we do in that space. But Andy's been through this for a while, so he can speak to it more.
This is, like I said, I've up until this past year when I've joined 80 Players, I've been working as a church worker, as an educator, right? So I think sometimes I take for granted. I have to be aware of this, is that I take for granted the water I'm swimming in, or kind of swimming in day to day. I was in a Lutheran high school and a Lutheran university, and sometimes you lose sight of the larger world,
Yes.
right? The need to be outside of those walls, right? It gets very siloed. It gets very, and you're doing the work that you're called to do in those spaces, and it was important and valuable work. But I do think that there is, for me, again, just this constant need to be reminded that I have to be active, right? I can't, I'm a Midwesterner. We get nonplussed about a lot of things. We're just very, it's fine. It's cold. You're not gonna. But I think overall, like there is this, for me, what I've drawn from this is that this world isn't permanent, and who am I making this better for? And then those reasons, why would I do that? And it's because that's what I'm called to do through Christ, and that's, I think, again, it's been a challenge, but also a great blessing in my own thinking and being able to write this and have this put up at 80 players.
That's fantastic. Yeah. I'm just amazed that like this small pastor in a kind of throwaway kind of town and time still has so much to say to us in his words, but he was working out with fear and trembling, as Paul says, to work out our faith with what he said, and how he said it still is a deep resonance in for today. When I was in seminary, I took a class on Bonhoeffer, and it changed the way I looked at theology, at Christianity. It became really the basis for most of the things I've done is trying to work out his theology, wondering, is this true? Right? Does Christ actually exist in the incognito? And then I show up at AA and Christ exists in the incognito, right? And so it's not that the church that needs to, in a sense, baptize things that the Spirit's doing in the world to make it palatable for Christians. Bonhoeffer's call is to stand in the world that God loves,
That's
right? And get converted, in a sense, by the world in the presence, bearing witness to Jesus. Very different.
Yeah. It's a tough thing to really square when you think about that. It's a full commitment. It's not a partial.
Yes.
Yeah. It's not a partial choice. Like, I'll do that on Wednesday.
Right.
And it'll be fine, and I'll go back to whatever
I've said
it is.
the words. I'm going to heaven now.
Yeah.
He would laugh at that. As much as I think Paul does, and maybe Jesus does.
Jesus does too.
Not that I can speak for that.
So, can I stir the pot now?
Please.
So, Bonhoeffer has probably come on people's radar, some people's radars. A lot of people probably don't know, but a guy named Eric Metaxas wrote a book. I guess you could call it a biography, although it was pretty panned by the academics and the Bonhoeffer family and
Anybody who read Bonhoeffer.
Anybody who knew anything about Bonhoeffer, because what it did was, Metaxas is kind of a popular voice in sort of the right-wing politics, and so it sort of became like Bonhoeffer's life and the way that he dramatized it. There's even a movie that's come out based on that book. Was it Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy or Spy?
No, that's John Le Carre.
That was actually a good movie.
But no, it was like
Master Martyr, Prophet Spy.
Prophet Spy,
yeah.
But anyway, there's a lot of things in what I've read is the movie is a dramatization, not a documentary, because there are a lot of things that happen in the movie, a lot of things that he did in the movie, a lot of things are said in the movie that didn't happen, that he didn't do. But I mean, that's the thing. If you don't know, if you haven't read Bonhoeffer and it's presented to you in a packaged way,
That's right.
That's easy for you to digest, and you're like, oh, okay, well, I like this guy. And one of the things that has been really criticized is that Metaxas takes Bonhoeffer and sort of uses Bonhoeffer's life and action, again, distorted, to lift up Christian nationalism in the United States, particularly, for one side of this whole argument, which would be the right side or the Republican side. When the book came out, I think Biden was Hitler.
Yes.
But so it was this whole thing about how you have to stand up, you have to take a stand, you have to
The Bonhoeffer moment.
all of these things, but very culturally appropriated to say to stand up against the gay people and stand up against the immigrants and stand up against this and to stand up against that. It's like, help people understand, like, there's a difference between a cultural appropriation and all three of you, but there's a difference between culturally appropriating someone like Dietrich Bonhoeffer and then like what he really actually said and did. Because some of the things that he really did say and do, like being a part of this plot, but at the same time never, I mean, I was reading, it's like he never felt, what was the word, Luke? He never felt like that was something that that should have been rationalized from his Christian theological perspective. I think he battled with himself always.
Ethics does that. I mean, it's almost like written in blood because he is struggling so deeply. That's exactly right, John. He doesn't.
But they've used, I will say, people have used this particular book or this kind of way of thinking of Bonhoeffer to justify standing up to the point of violence against a government you do not agree with. That's very different than what Hitler and Nazi Germany and what they were doing in these concentration camps than to what we feel aggrieved about today. But talk a little bit about that, Matt. I'd like to hear your thoughts on it too, and kind of your thoughts. Sure. I mean, because that's the dangerous thing, is like a lot of people in our country, that'll be the only way they get to know Bonhoeffer, and they'll think, oh, well, I must be not doing this right.
So I'll plug actually a really great book here, Stephen Haynes' book, The Battle for Bonhoeffer, which Stephen Haynes is a theology professor at Rhodes College in Memphis. And his book really encapsulates this kind of contemporary struggle for who owns Bonhoeffer. And I think the answer is no one. And I think that's the right answer, is that when we continually put him in his context, in the right context of his life, that is actually where we need to, he can speak to us and what we're currently, going through on a day-to-day, existence. But I think for us to be truthful to what he went through and for what he suffered and struggled for, we have to keep him in that context that he was a prisoner of the Nazis. He was, he didn't know the ending. He doesn't have this benefit of 80 years plus going, oh, that's actually how that story wraps up, and we see how it all works out, so to speak, and the good guys win, and that's fine. Like there's a smugness perhaps that exists because we know the ending. He's trying to live through this on a day-to-day, moment-by-moment existence, trying to find his space and his footing of faith. And I think it's very easy to say the social activism, the social part of, caring for the downtrodden and those who have been, cast aside. Like, yes, we're going to glom to that. Or it's very clear to say, hey, he's resistant against the government, and we're going to glom onto that, and we're going to miss the point that what's at the center of all this is always Christ.
Yes.
And I think that's what both sides miss in all this, is that if you're going to take a stand that follows, Bonhoeffer's positions, then you have to start where he starts, which is Christ. And that's where he also ends, is with Christ. If you're going in any direction that does not involve Christ, you're not going to find the truth of that position.
That's right.
And so that's really where, I mean, in my approach, that I read Stephen Haynes' book fairly early on because he does a great job of laying out, here is how Bonhoeffer's been presented in media and books and films and plays and operas and all of these things. And here's how scholarship has approached him. It's a really great overview. And then here's how, the big kind of contemporary struggles that, of course, I think Metaxas' book prompted a larger conversation, because all of a sudden the Bonhoeffer tent got big.
Real big.
Yeah. All of a sudden people said, oh, and then, which is a plus. But it's also a plus if they're getting the the information that makes you dig a little deeper and not just assume one side.
That one came out in 2010, is that right? 2011?
It was early on 20, somewhere in that space.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so it's over a decade ago that book has been around. So,
a couple of really quick things, but I've been very heartened by our audiences. We've had a number of people reach out. Bonhoeffer scholars, some historians, etc., who have said, "Can you tell us the source materials that this play is based on?" And I know right away, knowing the controversy, my response is just really quick. I'm like, it's not based on Eric Metaxas' book. And they all go, great, we're going to come and see it.
Of course, yeah.
Well, that's been done now. There's a movie out
that's right.
by Christian studio.
I've read the book, and I find it actually to be really, like, in many ways,
he's a good storyteller.
He's a great storyteller.
He's a great storyteller.
There's a good cadence to it, and he's a good writer. But, that's
that
exactly what happened. That doesn't mean it's
true. That doesn't mean it's true.
That's right.
It doesn't mean it's accurate. It doesn't mean that everybody associated with Bonhoeffer Bonhoeffer at any level
Right.
didn't repudiate it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, the shortcuts in the
scoured
theology,
him.
are
Yeah.
pretty.
And,
yeah.
I think
Probably
it's
still have some ice packs from there.
Stephen Haynes. He's a good friend actually, and I was with him as he was writing that book.
Oh, wow. No way.
After the
Yeah.
Metaxas book came out, and he
Yeah.
and I met. I love him.
Yeah.
And he really struggled with the way that certain ideas get appropriated in our culture.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so to talk to him about, like, in real time as he's writing chapters of this book, right, was really interesting to say. And he struggled with that as
Yeah.
well, to say, how do I both not use, as you said, Bonhoeffer for my own, because you have to, like historical criticism, place everything, even the words of Jesus, in the history and the context they are, and not appropriate them for a political or ideological, right? And as we're attempting to do in our own particular context, how do we actually just follow Christ the center?
The purity of motive is a really tough
Right?
thing to prove.
Yeah, right? The words, the ministry, how do you say it, John?
The words, the teachings, the actions
Yeah.
of Jesus. You
Yeah.
know, that's what we're about. I mean, and that's where I think it all comes back. And it was like when our denomination went through, like a lot of denominations, you know, this whole battle over human sexuality. And it, for me, is someone who's kind of been more in that kind of center right space in my life. It was like, okay, I just don't see a lot of the embodiment of Jesus in the way we're going through this process.
Yeah.
I mean, because people are being objectified, people are being demonized, people are being categorized, you know, and I'm like, but there's still a child of God.
Yeah.
You don't have to agree with everyone's lifestyle. And when you watch, and again, you go back to Jesus ate with sinners and tax collectors, and they called him a glutton and a drunkard, right? And when he ate with them, never once do you see in any of those stories does he condemn them. As a matter of fact, he never condemns a sinner in the New Testament. In the Gospels, Jesus said he didn't come to condemn. He didn't come to do that. Yeah. And that's hard for people, because that's like, well, that's not kind of the way I think religion works. I was like, well, Jesus wasn't about religion per se. And so for us, it's like, if you get back to that, I tell people all the time, if Jesus did it, I'm glad to do it. If he didn't do it, I don't think we need to be doing it. And so that's kind of what's been kind of our North Star is, you know, we're
Shocker, it's Jesus. Wow.
Yeah.
Like, how radical.
And I
is that
think
a thing now?
that really helped us. That really helped us. That really helped us move through, man, what's been a tough season with the with this, all the political drama that's been going on for a while, and the pandemic, and then, you know, vaccines and masks, and, you know, now a new election. It's just all this disruption in society. And we talked about this on the podcast not long ago about this big study from Pew that came out about evangelicals. And like people who self-identify as Christian evangelicals, like third of them don't even go to church and don't read the Bible.
That's right.
And I'm kind of like, wait, I don't think that. What is that?
Not quite how that works.
Because
using that
it's
word.
become a politicized, and so this whole Christian nationalism. When people say, "Well, what does that mean exactly?" It's like you're trying to, you're taking Christianity, and you're trying to use earthly, political, temporal power to impart and implement the values, the virtues of the kingdom of God, which is counter, right, of that. And so, but so that's why you get this people like, well, we have to win the elections at any cost. We have to have our people up there. We have to be controlled. We have to have president. We have to do this. We have to do this. And whatever it takes for us to win the election, we will do.
Yes.
Right?
Well,
threaten
it's
people,
a
scare
moral
people.
Question, right? You know, you lie to get the outcome, right?
Correct.
Or you do whatever it takes to.
The means, I mean, the ends justify the means, right? So, and again, this is like, you see Christians in our day and time, people who claim to be Christian, who are engaging in non-Christian, unchristian behaviors and actions in order that they might attain Christian outcome.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you can't do that. It doesn't work that way. You don't get to be like an evil, violent, disruptor, negative, dehumanizing person so that you can win the battle to hang the 10 Commandments in your courthouse or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, And plus, what kind of victory is that anyway?
I mean, I don't know about y'all, but there's days where I feel like I'm taking crazy pills with some of this stuff because it's so deeply rooted in, you know, the notion of, like you said, cultural Christianity or heritage Christianity, where folks utilize, I wouldn't even call it, they utilize the truth, right, as this scant little thing, and then they try to weaponize it for something that it's effectively never been and never should be. We see it a lot, all over the place. We see, I mean, all of us, we see it in our daily lives, but I so want to grasp people by the shirt collar and just yell, like scream in their face. But I know, in Christian law,
I feel like it's going the wrong way. I feel like that's.
But when I say I feel like I'm taking crazy pills, I really do. I'm like, there's been such a hijacking and a recalibration of that message to serve some sort of ideology that is not Jesus Christ. And that's where I'm like, all right, come on, y'all. Let's like hunker down now. Let's really get back to it.
No, I was just going to say, even within the church. So, like when we went through our, the Episcopalians have gone through it. Well, Lutherans, y'all have so many different Lutherans. I can't know which one are Evangelical Missouri Synod. Lutheran of 1516, 15. There's like I'm a Lutheran 1519.
Well, I mean, there's the big Lutherans.
There's the big mama. But anyway,
Lutherans,
we've all been through this, and so as United Methodists went through this thing, there was this whole thing by this I call them sort of the righteous remnant, right? They're the ones that really are trying to be holy, and it's like we're going to be the confessing church. We're going to stand up to the church, you the United Methodist Church, because you have cozied up with the culture and the woke and the this and the that. And I'm kind of like, did you actually read the Barmen Declaration? Because if you did, it's like all it says is there will be no higher loyalty that we will like salute, to use my layman's terms, than Jesus. That's it. Like no government, no leader. And now Christians are like, we have to have this kind of government and this kind of person or whatever it is. And it's like, that is not what's in the Barmen Declaration. It's like, so I think that what we've done is more faithful to that. Like that's unity was a value for Jesus, right? And Paul, we're the body of Christ, we're connected. And I think that's why when you talk about Bonhoeffer, man, going through that, he had to deal with it contextually in like what we look back historically is like the worst. Like World War I didn't have Hitler. World War I was bad, but it was just this huge kind of crazy collision of alliances, and all the dominoes kind of started falling or whatever. It was kind of like we stumbled into that whole thing, which is horrific. But with the whole you have someone who, not to try to turn him into, I don't know, dehumanize even Hitler, which I guess you could do that. That would be okay. No, but I mean,
I'm sure.
No. But I mean, but where you have some, where like it's like literally you can look at this and go, okay, now we're talking about evil, like humans looking at other humans and saying you are not clean enough or pure enough.
Well, there's no true Christian, right? No true Scotsman in this. You're going to end up. No one is worthy, and again, that's actually right. The core.
That's right.
Right, all have sinned and all have fallen short.
That's right.
I mean, I was thinking about this is that as we're talking, the application of power we've mistaken as God's favor. The ability to wield power has become what we align as the true and clear way, right? To follow. Right. I'm going to go back ancient here. The Consolation of Philosophy by Boethius. 5th century Roman.
Boethius.
Oh yeah, the kids are hip to Boethius these days, man.
It's a jam.
The rapper.
But one of the when I was
I like that.
Bo. But when I was
Little Bo is what they call it.
Opening act is
on this, it's like on these streets, But when I was in my first semester of grad school, and I took a class on Chaucer, also hip with the kids.
Oh, yeah.
My professor made us read the Consolation of Philosophy, which Chaucer had been the first English translation of, and there was a moment that stuck with me. So going back all the way back to 2002, that I think about really frequently, where Lady Philosophy has come to Boethius in his prison cell. He's been betrayed, and he's awaiting his execution. And he's hanging out with Lady Poetry until Lady Philosophy comes down and says, "Get that strumpet out of here. You need to do the hard work while you're here, not this soothing with entertainment." But she talks about power, and she says, if you saw an ant lording power over another ant, wouldn't you laugh? Wouldn't you like look down at those ants on the ground and just kind of pity them and mock them? And that image, so simple, so clean, has always like kind of like just for my own just kind of political understanding and just kind of human understanding stuck with me in the way that, how often do we think that my ability to control this person or this groups of people or to have somebody on my behalf do those certain things, and that's the power and that's the favor, and I what I'm doing is just I'm an ant
and it's ecclesiastical.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
and I think
100%.
it also gets at our understanding of power.
Yeah.
That we have this idea from an
That it's
abstract,
ours.
and that it's abstract, and we start with God as omnipotent. But we come to the gospel, we come to the entire canon of Scripture, and God's love is God's power. Right? And so, and even Paul picks it up and says, whatever power you think you have has to be poured out anyway. It has to be empty. There's a great kenosis, he says in Philippians, right? And so, but then Christians, we cherry pick those things, and actually, I don't think we want to follow Jesus in the world, because Bonhoeffer showed the difficulty of that. It's fraught and it's contested every day. What I want is I want security and assurances. And so we've created a faith where you can be secure and you can be assured that you're going to heaven, and all those people that didn't say the right words are going to hell. And that's the kind of faith that we've exported across the world.
We've made ourselves judges of that impossible
and
question.
when we wed ourselves with that kind of power, not with the power of redemptive love, we wed ourselves to political and ideological. We don't follow Jesus anymore.
And I will say, just to be fair, because it sounds like we're only bashing like the right side. I will say, and we've talked. No, I'm just saying, on the left side, on the liberal side of this, there's been this cultural desire to like make everybody be okay with everything. or like
creating a new homogeneity of thought.
There's all kinds of criticisms that go on both sides, but this is what I'm saying, it's a partisan political thing. Sometimes you think you're only talking about, like, we're only talking about Trump right now. Well, you can go back 4 years ago and you can have arguments during COVID and how things were done and all this kind of stuff that are equal critical arguments of the left that you can have the right.
Yes.
100%.
It's just there's something about the Christian, that's where I see some difference.
That's where they align.
The Christian evangelical or this Christian nationalism thing is really more located in the right side of the spectrum.
Could we say the problem with German Christianity is that it's German Christianity? The problem with American Christianity is that it's American Christianity,
that's
right?
right.
And
Amen.
so once we begin to align that self with the way that we've been formed culturally, there's a part of that I think necessitates almost a second conversion in a way that Bonhoeffer had. He had to pull out the hook of his cultural conversion and say, wait a minute, my country and who I love and whom I thought got a raw deal coming out of the First World War, right? And was marginalized and hamstrung. He had to begin to say, oh, that is different than the way of Jesus in the world. Widow, orphan, stranger, alien.
That's right.
Where is Christ? Christ is in the suffering world.
Well, and it makes you have to humble yourself, pull yourself down from wherever you think you are. I mean, to quote another of my favorite theologians, Bob Dylan.
Come on.
He's right there.
I saw Bob on there, but but he's he said in High Water for Charlie Patton, he said, as great as you are, man, you'll never be greater than yourself. There is no way to get above your level. Like, you are never going to ascend to the level of Christ, to the level of God. Like, you are at your ceiling right now. No matter what that is, you will never be greater than yourself. And that is something that we forget, I think, frequently as American Christians. And
I'm just loving the whole Dunning-Kruger effect. I've been using the hell out of that thing. The Dunning-Kruger effect is like somebody who's too stupid to know. So when you're ignorant, like when you're ignorant and you don't really know something, you always inflate that you know more than you do about something. And then as you grow in your proficiency and your knowledge, you actually start to become more humble and realize, I don't know everything about this. I just think the whole world right now and our culture is suffering from this Dunning-Kruger effect. Everybody thinks there's death. There's a guy that wrote a book called The Death of Expertise, because everyone has the internet and they can just pull it up. And you know what? I know more about Bonhoeffer than you do. because even though you studied it and you quoted all those books and you've been reading it for years, I read this article by so-and-so.
Now I'm going to jump on my keyboard and warrior.
Yeah, right? Which is then an absolute, like, I think it bears witness to the fact that we don't know Bonhoeffer.
Yeah.
If we're fighting about Bonhoeffer, Bonhoeffer would say, where is Christ? Right? In my brother and sister. Right? Who is Christ, my brother and sister? Where is Christ? In the suffering. If you are not aligned with the suffering of the world, we can't talk about Bonhoeffer.
Yeah.
It's all another idea. It's all a type of spiritual
This goes back, we've said this, is that like when you look at things going on right now, I've mentioned this in a sermon recently, it's like no matter where you are on, say, an issue, policy issue like immigration, right, or the border and stuff, if you don't have a sense of empathy and love for people who are being deported or disrupted, or they've been here for 30 years and they're 4 daughters are now shipped out and they've never even lived. They don't even have a place to go. I understand they're not here legally. I understand that that's a policy and laws and they're implementing all this stuff. But you can't then turn these people and like, all right, let's go. It's like that is just you ex-Christian. That's the point we're trying to make. It's like you have to have some sadness about a brother and sister in Christ. I mean, just put yourself in that place. And that's where I see just a lot of the just Christians who almost gleeful in people's struggle and suffering. And I'm just like, I don't recognize
There's
that.
a vitriolic spirit that seems to have been hovering over
and people are
some
made
parts of the body.
People are made to be these they're dehumanized, they're turned into pawns, and they're just it's just a pile of stuff, right? When people refer to people as trash or whatever, it's kind of like, I'm sure that all of us have those moments, but it doesn't make it right. Doesn't make it okay.
But the great part is that, hey, go look in the mirror. You are just as trashy as whoever that person is, right? Like it's pretty clear. If Paul says I'm the worst of these sinners, what chance do any of us have, right?
That's
I think that's one of the things at 80 Players that we keep central into the way that we operate is that we all fully know that we are, like I said, I've said it twice now before, I'll say it again, that we're pretty screwed up, right?
Yeah.
But because of the salvific grace of Jesus Christ, we are able to walk forward and try to serve his kingdom. And that's the only reason. Otherwise, we're all dead men walking, 100%, right? And so, it is hard, but it is one of those things. It's a temptation to be in judgment over other folks, and to say it's much easier than to turn it on your own self and say, "What am I doing, man?"
Okay, so if you want tickets to this bad boy, how do you get them?
Yeah, that's why we're going to wind this down. I want you to tell us about the play. Where can people go to find out more information, all that good stuff?
So 80players.org on your phone, on your laptop, on your iPad, or if you find yourself on Westheimer because you made some terrible life decisions, you can just stop in at the theater and But we're right there.
You go so many ways with that.
Oh, dear Lord, right?
Bad location.
No. I just everybody. And anytime you say, hey, where are you? We're in the Galleria. They go, no, 5420 West Time. Yeah, but so the tickets are available on our website, or you can call our box office, and they'll be at will call. We have Keely and Carol Ann in the box office, and Marion. They will happily take your phone order, and your tickets will be waiting there with your name on it when you show up to the show. We open previews tomorrow, April 9th, and we run through May 4th.
And anybody listening to this podcast, if we just called our marketing director and said, hey, give us a code so that we can give this as a gift to y'all. So Joy15, if you put that in there.
Pod15.
Thank you. This is why before we started this, I told Andy, I was like, remind me what this was.
Pod15.
Pod15.
For
Pod15
4 tickets,
for 4 tickets are 15% off. So if anybody who's listening to this and you want to use it.
And there's also a congregational discount for groups above 12. I think that discount goes higher.
Call the box office. I don't have a code on that.
We will definitely be lifting it up and promoting that. I think it's good, and just the 80 players all together. Thank y'all for coming.
No, thanks for having us.
Being a part of this. This is really good, and we'll get you to come back sometime. When you got some other shows going up, maybe open some doors for some other.
I'm adapting Crime and Punishment for next year right now. If y'all want to go into some deep Dostoevsky
now. Who knew?
Hip hop.
Really?
That's for next season. So if y'all want to
I'd start
Dig
with
into
this.
that.
Yeah,
Dear
that's
Lord.
good.
That dark
awesome.
flow.
Yeah, you got easy subjects all around
Yeah,
us.
that's
The 80
good.
players.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
For those of you who are listening, make sure that you like and subscribe and share. You may want to share with other people here around the Houston area who are interested in this information. This is a great resource if you are part of the 80 players. I'd love to find a way, Jeff, for us to maybe tag these guys and when it goes out and make sure that if people are following them on social that they'll have an access to this to learn
Oh,
more
you're
about
going to
that.
be
That'd great.
disappointed.
We have a small reach.
Hey, look, it's all good. It's all
My
good.
mom will be happy to watch the podcast. That would be good. Yeah.
Hey, that's kind of our audience.
Yeah.
That's my
Yeah,
mom.
there you go. We got our
Your
moms.
mom.
We're crushing
They
it.
were crushing it with the moms. Crushing it with the moms. You know, it's interesting. We actually, I don't really know. I mean, we get a pretty good engagement. We had a young couple that was here Sunday.
Yes.
And it's like, hey, we found you through the podcast.
Yes.
We listened to
All right.
the podcast. So
I mean, it's a
it's-
really good titled
Yeah,
podcast. It's
yeah,
fantastic.
well,
it is
good.
great. Jeff, you get all the credit.
Is that Jeff?
Gets
Yeah,
credit for
Jeff
that.
is
A+,
he's the
Jeff.
brains.
Well
We're the
played, Jeff.
looks, and Jeff is the
Yeah.
brains.
Yeah.
So we have a way we end the podcast. We just kind of go around and say our name. So I'm John Stevens,
Andy Pederson.
Jayme McGhan.
Matt Russell.
and this is Pod Have Mercy.